All right, hey there, everyone. Feels a little weird to not be running the show tonight. Just here to give a little mini talk about networking, and we'll talk about some games production after that. For anyone who doesn't know me, I am Sam Cammarata, as Noah introduced, producer and operations manager also at Aesthetician Labs, local Rochester-based worker-owned games cooperative. You may or may not know us from Crazy Plates if you're local to the Rochester area. Over the course of our 4+ years in development, AeLa has moved from hyper-casual games to contract work to pitching indie games that are on a larger scale, and all of that has given me a lot of experience in terms of networking and changing the types of people we're networking with. So it is on that merit that I will be talking with you about, based on my experience, some best practices and whatnot in terms of networking. We'll talk about kind of defining networking and the basics of it, some best practices, obviously through the lens of my experience, some additional thoughts I had, and then if you have any networking related questions, we can obviously cover those at the end. And after that is when we'll move on to some more general production Q&A. So, and before we begin, I will say, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to drop those in chat. Noah and I are both kind of monitoring chat, and I'll be happy to answer anything as we go. So starting off with kind of defining what networking is. I kind of think of it as the process of meeting and becoming friends with folks in the games industry with whom you have things in common. Often people will think it is a transactional sort of relationship. It might be like faking a shallow relationship with people that you're complete strangers with. Might be asking for things without like sharing things in return. It might be an entirely take sort of relationship rather than a give and take. People think that networking can be immediate. People often also think of networking as kind of scary, and I will say it's none of those things, personally. Networking is a professional reciprocity in my mind, which is just a relationship with mutual benefit, at least in the best case scenarios. When we talk about networking, another popular thing to think about is where networking happens. Most commonly, I think indie games developers think of networking happening at games conferences. And they do. It happens at conferences of all sizes. It can be local, like Rock Game Fest. It can be a global scale conference like GDC, if you're familiar. It can also happen at kind of peripheral events to those conferences, like parties, talks, and even if you're at something like GDC, it might be at the cafe down the street. Or if you are at Rock Game Fest, it might be at the food trucks outside. Networking happens at these formal events, but also kind of on the outskirts of them very often. Networking also happens online, though. It can start with something as simple as a DM on Twitter or an email. It's also great to kind of schedule video calls as kind of a subsequent step of networking online. It doesn't have to be just face-to-face, although personally, I do prefer face-to-face. But networking happens everywhere. Another thing that we talk about when we think about networking is kind of how that initial connection gets made. Verbiage that I've heard used is kind of the heat of a contact. So there's warm contacts, which is, okay, a mutual friend of ours thought that we would be a good connection, and so they put us in touch with each other. A hot connection would be someone literally introduces the two of you and says, Sam, I want you to meet Noah, and literally puts us face to face. Warm might be someone gave me Noah's email and told me to email them, and then I could use our mutual friend's email or name in the email. In both warm and hot contacts, those are favorable. You want your contacts to be as warm as possible. Be very gracious when accepting these contacts because they are more likely to stick. And use that mutual friend who kind of gave you the heat of that contact. Use that to your advantage. The other alternative to obviously a hot or a warm contact would be cold contact. And we are very familiar with the idea of cold contacting as just kind of reaching out blindly. And that is basically what it is. And when I say that warm and hot contacts are preferable, that doesn't mean that cold contacts are bad. They absolutely aren't. I've made a number of really tremendous connections via cold contacts, and I think anyone can. Some tips to that I would have: introduce yourself. That might seem really obvious, but I've gotten cold contacts from people who don't take the time to introduce themselves and why they're relevant. It makes it a lot harder for the person on the receiving end to accept that and kind of reel that in. So introduce yourself, explain why you think you have things in common, going back to that definition we have of networking, meeting people that you have things in common with. Going in with no expectations is another big thing with cold contacts. Is really the outreach for a cold contact should be an invitation. It shouldn't be critical. It should be, hi, I would love to talk with you if you have the time, if you have the energy. Following up once or twice, totally good practice. But pestering someone obviously isn't. That touches a little bit on initial connections in terms of how we make those initial connections and how we initiate. If you're not necessarily face-to-face with someone, you have a number of tools at your advantage. The first is Twitter. The games industry is largely on Twitter. That's changing slowly, but I think for now, Twitter is still a really great place to be if you were trying to make networking connections. It's not my favorite, but it's also a very good tool for understanding mutual connections. You can find someone that you look up to quite easily on Twitter, but you can also start to understand who they follow and follow that network out. If people's DMs on Twitter are open, in my experience, people will respond to Twitter DMs more than they will respond to necessarily something like email or the dreaded LinkedIn DM. There's lots of other ways you could reach out to someone, but Twitter DMs, in my experience, has proven to be a pretty good ratio of success to failure in terms of people at least saying hi and responding back. Email is another good one, especially if they don't have Twitter DMs open. And email has this wonderful tool that I love to use, and that is if outreach is making you anxious, using the tool of scheduling an email later. And if anyone has any, qualms about this, I will say I've used it plenty of times as a tool to kind of separate myself from the initial outreach. And it works wonders to be able for me to craft this initial outreach email, but then say it's going to be a little hard for me to send this right away. So I'm going to schedule it to go out tomorrow at a random time that I pick that I think would be reasonable for both of our time schedules. And then I just I'm able to set it and forget it. And then it goes out without you having to push the button. I love email for outreach. You can put a little bit more love and craft into it. Twitter DMs have a little bit less friendliness in my experience. But regardless, any digital format like this is a tool for your networking, especially if you struggle with the social anxiety part of networking, because you can spend as much time as you want refining that message. For some people, this can kind of go to the extreme of being a con because you spend too much time crafting that message. But if you are able to keep that in check, I really find that to be a pro. We can talk about that more if anyone wants to. So now we're going to move into just kind of rapid fire thoughts that I have about networking. Some best practices that I have seen, I've heard, I've experienced in no particular order. First of which is to stay in touch over time. When we talk about networking as developing relationships and not being an immediate creation, staying in touch over time helps build rapport and kind of healthy relationships, because those healthy relationships take time to develop. It builds trust, a sense that this person is reliable, a sense that you're not just in it for the short term. I find that networking style relationships tend to age like fine wine. They tend to get better over time, especially as both ends of that relationship also become more experienced and their networks grow. Being there for the long run proves that you aren't invested in something very short term. Another thought I had: work to consciously unidolize anyone that you're trying to approach. There might be someone who you really look up to in the industry, who you think you subconsciously or consciously idolize a little bit. You think oh, this person's just absolutely the coolest. And when you think about reaching out to them, you get additionally nervous. I would say to consciously try to unwrap that a little bit, because those people are just like normal people that you talk with all the time, perhaps a bit more skilled, and perhaps having made something that you really enjoy. But how cool would it be to have that person in your network, to at least be able to talk with that person once? A great exercise that I've used to kind of help me with this is to think about people that you currently are connected to, and think about before you knew them, if you looked up to them. I can think of a number of people, even just in the rock game dev community, that I used to really look up to as being a little intimidating, who I now consider to be good friends. And the process of unidolizing future people, I look back on those friends I have now and say, those people that I used to look up to, they're just people. And everyone is just people. Focus on finding folks that you have things in common with. We've talked about this a little bit before. But it can be really useful when you're trying to think, okay, I need to expand my network. I need to meet more people. But where do I even start? Start with those things that you have things in common with. Start with those people that you have things in common with. When we were first starting, networking with other people who were in our career niche, we were doing hyper casual games, was a great example. It gave a great thing that we had in common, a thing to talk with people about, but also then furthered our careers because those people that we were connected to were in our career space and could kind of give us more insights into what was going on. This could also, though, be, game devs in your local area. Rock Game Dev is a great example of that. You could share, things in common with people who also work in Unity or Unreal, or people who are really big fans of Double Fine or, Stardew Valley. Like, name anything that you could have in common with another developer and use that to your advantage when you're trying to find folks who you might reach out to. Only ask for things from your network if you're willing to share or help them in return. This is just something that I personally have a little bit of a pet peeve about and have grown in a lot on my end, on both sides, I would say. The person that you are offering to, especially if they're significantly more experienced than you, they might not ask you for anything in return for giving you something and for being connected with you. But your willingness to say, hey, if you need anything that I might be able to help with, please just let me know, demonstrates that you're not in it for a take relationship. Those can be really draining to be on the other end of. And demonstrating that, you're willing to be in a give and take is really critical just for healthy relationships in general, but specifically for networking. When you're approaching people, you are less, necessary. I should stop myself. When you approach people who you may not have as much in common with as you would just a friend on the street. A couple more best practices and additional thoughts. When we talk about networking, a lot of people get anxious, myself included. With that, emotional intelligence and social skills, obviously super useful. If you're really extroverted and have a wealth of these social skills, networking might come a little bit easier to you. And if those aren't your strongest skills, I want to reassure you that is perfectly okay. You can still build meaningful relationships and a wealth of network for yourself, despite those not being your strongest skills. It's super normal to be intimidated. I, as the person who does the majority of networking for AeLa, I would say on a day-to-day basis, still find it a bit intimidating from time to time and can still find some success. It is both a personal and professional endeavor. And with that, I mean networking and social skills in general are just that. They're a skill. They can be developed over time, and the more that you practice that, the better that you get. And it can be fun if you let it and if you're able to. But also in that it is both personal and professional, I would encourage you to have boundaries. I have to set boundaries for myself quite strongly around this sometimes, especially if I get going on Twitter DMs with people that I'm really excited to talk to, is to say, okay, I'm not going to look at my Twitter DMs after 7 p.m. or so. Skills and that kind of boundary between personal and professional are two of the biggest things that I've struggled with in networking, and just want to emphasize as being very normal, and also as being very flexible. You have to understand what's best for you. That's about all I have in terms of thoughts I wanted to share. Obviously, I do want to answer any questions if you have them, but this was a mini talk. It was meant to be nice, short, and sweet. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in chat. If you want to find me and talk about this after the fact, you can find me on Discord You can email me. You can find me on Twitter, but don't plan on me responding right away. I'm not really on Twitter these days as much as I am at other times. But I put my Twitter here just in case. We'll give questions a few minutes, I think.
Yep. Yeah, we'll wait for things to roll in. Please put your questions in chat, and we'll address them as they come. While we wait, I do actually have a couple for you, Sam.
Yeah.
A couple thoughts. Speaking of Discord, you mentioned Twitter and email as places to do networking online, but do you have any thoughts about Discord as a platform for networking as communities are starting to grow there and we're seeing kind of people move over there?
I personally use Discord less. Like, I'm in large scale communities like that less. But certainly I understand that as like a really powerful tool. And for some place that is like your primary place to be in online communities, I would say definitely if the person that you want to reach out to is available to reach out to on Discord, I would more than encourage that. And if you share a Discord community, that can be the thing that you have in common. That is a great starting seed for why you would approach someone or something that you can talk with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on Discord as a networking platform?
Oh, I've been given the platform. I will say, I'm in the Wholesome Games Discord and the Rock Game Dev, obviously, and then a couple other like industry specific. But I think the most important thing there is that when you're engaging with those communities, that is a little bit more of, you have to take an approach of being part of the community and contributing to the community, just like you can't have a one-on-one relationship where it's all take. You can't just show up in these servers and post, this is what I'm working on, does anyone have any thoughts, and never do the same for others, right? And so there is a bit of work there. There's a bit of monitoring, and especially with the bigger servers like Wholesome Games and stuff, it's kind of hard to keep up with. So it can be difficult to keep up with those, but I think it's very important for your reception and ability to actually grow your network in those spaces. I do know also that I believe on Discord now it's possible for like community servers for you to DM people if you share the community server, so you don't just have to be friends. So DMing on Discord is getting a little bit easier. So maybe if you are just lurking in a community and you see somebody and you say, oh, that's a really cool person, and then send an individualized reach out, that kind of short circuits that involvement in the community. But I do think that it's important if you're going to try to build, find smaller servers, or start, being present and active in those communities before you start trying to, get benefits from it again.
I mean, when we talk about the foundation of any good relationship being trust and kind of that rapport, being active in a community and kind of showing face and contributing and giving back to a community before you try to outreach with any one particular person is building that trust ahead of making the like one-on-one contact. And that's really important. I see a question here from Slightly Unknown. Could you give some examples of what you could say/do if you're networking with someone much more experienced other than just asking them for stuff all the time? Certainly. There is, to me, there is a certain authenticity about being forward about what it is. So even, I talk about networking not being transactional, but sometimes the impetus for reaching out to someone is truly that you would like something out of that relationship. And with that, I would just say, don't be transparent about that thing that you're looking for, but don't necessarily like go in with that single track mind. Typically something like this would look to me like, hi, my name is Sam. I'm producer at Aesthetician Labs. And I'm going to use the example of back when our team was looking to talk with social media managers for a specific project. We were trying to improve our social media flow. So I'm reaching out to these community managers at studios that we respect and think that they're doing cool stuff at, and say, hey, I'm Sam, producer at Aesthetician Labs. We're currently working on this project. Introduce the project a little bit. And for that project, we are trying to develop a community. Based on what I've seen you do at your studio and the sorts of social media that you are putting out, we really like what you're doing and would love to hear more from you about what that looks like. If you have the time and the capacity in your schedule, we'd love to sit down with you and have a chat. Please feel free to drop any times, or if you want any information from me. All the best, Sam. Throw some emojis in there, be cordial, stuff like that. In this specific instance, what I'm offering is very severe flexibility. Like, often these people might be in completely different time zones, and I am willing to kind of take a little bit of the brunt of the burn on it being a really inconvenient time for me. That is an offer that I'm giving this person is, hey, thank you for doing me this favor. I want to make it as easy for you as possible. Hey, I'll send links to my company. I'll send links to the game. I'll send information so that they don't have to go hunting. That is what I'm kind of offering in that initial kind of contact that kind of helps warm them up, if you will. But then if they say yes, if they get into that call with me, I'm very forthcoming about, why I think that they are a person worth reaching out to. And that means doing a bunch of legwork on my end to research what they do and what I like about their style. I'm not reaching out to everyone blindly. I might reach out to someone because I think that their tone on their social media messages is really cool and very fresh. And I'll praise them for that, like giving them compliments and sharing with them why I think that what they're doing is cool. And just being generally very warm and gracious is you're giving them thank you, and you're reciprocating that their time that they're giving you is valuable. Usually at the end of the call, it's definitely, on this last point, it depends on the contact. You kind of have to know and develop a gut intuition for whether or not it's right. But for some people, I might offer like, hey, if you ever need anything on any of your other projects that you think I'd be helpful for, like, please feel free to shoot me a DM. I'd be happy to help however I can. For some people, if they have dramatically more experience than you, that might not be applicable. But for some people who are a little bit more in parity with your skill level or your experience level, that might be a genuine offer. And even if you think it's maybe a little bit of a long shot, I still like to offer. It's just a sign of good faith. I don't know if that necessarily helps. It's not a complete script, but that is kind of the general format that I follow. I try to avoid using too much scripts. I write a lot of like templates and things to help automate my processes. But I really do try to avoid using scripts for something like outreach because it should be a little custom to everyone that you talk to. I'm not going to, say, hi, my name is Sam at Aesthetician Labs. I like you because X. I think you do Y. Very cool. Please talk to me. That would be too rigid, and it would feel really inauthentic to be on the receiving end of that. Feel free to let me know if you have any follow-up questions. I hope that's helpful.
It sounds a bit like kind of what you're saying is that the thing that you're giving to them in that kind of relationship more than anything is the doing that legwork of organizing and being organized and being prepared. You don't want to show up to that without knowing why you've gotten on that call, because they're giving you their time, and what you can give back is preparedness and as much time as possible.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing what questions you have going right in and knowing what exactly you're seeking from them, basically.
The nature of networked relationships can be different. Like sometimes I'm reaching out to a specific community manager because I want their expertise on a certain thing. I reached out to a few people who I ended up having calls with, who I feel like I could comfortably now go back to and talk with again and have like a follow-up conversation on if I wanted to these days. They're loosely in my network is how I would consider that. Versus there's other people who I met at a conference and we bonded really well face-to-face, not over needing anything from each other, but just over a good mutual discussion, maybe a shared value, maybe a shared interest. Those are people who might be more tightly in my network because, there's been more time and there's been a little bit less transaction in the relationship. There's also people who have been highly transactional, but just by virtue of a consistent give and take over years and years, that's a very tight-knit relationship. Not everyone in your network needs to be super close. It's like with friends. You don't need every single person to be your best friend, but you want some people who are really close and some people who are kind of in that middle distance and some people who might be on the periphery. All of those are valid, and that's part of a healthy network, is having that diversity, but also understanding kind of how to nurture relationships that are closer. See another question here. So one reason why I find myself hard to connect in-person meetings / conferences is because most people will already be talking in groups most of the time. Trying to find a common topic of interest or showing myself takes time, which easily discourages me to speak up. for any in-person networking opportunities, would waiting the group to disassemble, then talking to them as an individual be a good idea? Any good tips when approaching to groups? So this is something that anecdotally, I really struggle with approaching groups. And I say this because this is going to seem tangential, I promise it's not. I do acro yoga in my local gym, and I'm very good friends with the vast majority of people I see on a week-to-week basis in that space. But even though I know most of these people very well, and I see them every week for months and months and months at a time, when there's a group of 3 or more people talking in a circle, I find it darn near impenetrable. Even though I know these people, even though I know that they'd be happy to talk with me. So if you're doing that to strangers, it is impossibly hard, in my personal experience. Some people find this no problem, but very relatable what you've presented here. And I would say it depends a little bit on the setting, depends a little bit on kind of what, like, are you trying to interact with everyone in that group because maybe they're talking about something that you just really want to be in on the conversation? Or is it that, oh, there's one person in this group that I want to talk to? If you're only trying to, maybe there's one person in that group that you just really wanted to talk to, I would wait, personally. That's definitely a personal preference. Joining that group might be a good sign of, like Noah and I were talking about earlier, when you're visible in a Discord community, it kind of builds that initial trust. Joining that group conversation and being part of that conversation could build a little bit of initial trust so that when the group breaks apart, great, you've already had a seat of trust with someone who's in that circle. But if that is really hard for you, there's no one out there saying that you have to go join that group. Or maybe sometimes you find it easier than others. Follow what feels easy. In my experience, one of my kind of core rules is that the easier it feels, the more authentic and relaxed you can be, which generally makes the interaction go better. If you feel like you're having to force going into the group or going up to someone, it's going to be a lot harder for that to feel good for everyone involved. I'll also say that when you're approaching groups, my personal tact is to just listen. Like, go on the outskirts. People will usually open up physically to like let you into the circle, and just listen and pick up on the conversation. And I personally try not to speak too early until I feel like I understand what's happening in the circle. But with that, entering group dynamics is kind of a whole mini talk on its own. And we could continue to talk for hours about it. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to drop those. Do you have any additional thoughts?
I will say, I think for me, I've encountered this the most at GDC. It can be really difficult. If it's somebody that like, I want to talk to this person over there, like I've seen their stuff on Twitter, or maybe like you've even had some back and forth on Twitter or something, and you're like, I really want to connect with this person, and they're already in a conversation in a group. I've both been in the group that this has happened in and done this myself. And like, really what you have to do is you just have to walk up, understand that on a convention floor, people expect people to walk up to them, right? So you just have to walk up and join that group. And either, you're going to approach and immediately people are going to be like, oh, hey, what's going on? Or they're going to continue that conversation, kind of recognize you're there. Like Sam said, make the space. That's when you just start listening and you start waiting for the conversation to reach a point that you can jump in or that you are acknowledged, right? If it's a specific person, though, again, you can also come up and say, hey, guys, sorry to interrupt. And then, just say to the person or whatever, hey, I've seen your work and I thought it was really interesting. If now is not a good time right now, do you maybe do you want to grab coffee or something, like if you don't feel comfortable in that group setting, or you say, again, if you can come up and just like have that wait and see approach is usually the best. But again, if it feels like the conversation is, this is a group of friends, they're already really deep on something, again, just be like, hey, just wanted to chat about something or wanted to catch up if it's somebody that you maybe have seen around a little bit. And then again, give them the authentic opportunity to say, let's follow up, or maybe not, right? And maybe have your card ready to say, I just wanted to chat. If you want to follow up, here's my card. It's got my Twitter on it. Or I can follow up and DM you, whatever works for you.
I personally really try to avoid the approach of, hey, sorry to interrupt, just because like personally when I'm in groups, Like if I'm in the circle that someone comes into that feels really inauthentic as a general rule, that won't always be the case. Like you said, on convention floors, social rules kind of change just a little bit.
I will caution that specifically that's if you're approaching a group and you spend that time initially to kind of sit there and wait out and see what's going on with the conversation. And again, if it's something where it's like, it's going to, the conversation maybe isn't going in a direction that you're wanting to go, or you don't feel like it is easy for you to be recognized in that group. Those are opportunities to not just stand there awkwardly and then like drift away like that. That's the thing that you really don't want to do, right? Is like walk up, stand with the group for a little bit, say nothing, and then kind of drift away, because then that's a good way to never have a contact with that person. So if you don't have that space, that's an opportunity to, before people start feeling really weird about your presence there, just being like, hey, I just wanted to say hello, talk to you about, I really like what you do, X, Y, and Z. Again, I've been in groups where that specific scenario has happened, and it's totally fine, right? Like, it's okay, and especially when it's people that are highly visible in the industry, it's okay to go up and just say, hey, I just really like what you're doing, so on and so forth. I would love to chat with you about, again, be prepared. I would love to chat with you about X, Y, or Z at some point, if we can find some time. That opens that conversation.
I have two more thoughts on this. One is on the, sorry to interrupt, instead of saying that to the whole circle, I would say try to say that directly to the person that you are talking to. Like, if I'm trying to kind of make my way through a circle, not sit there and talk for forever, but I do want to make my presence known and talk with someone, I would physically try to enter the circle near that person, so that when there's a lull, I can turn to that person and kind of just quietly, as an aside, rather than to the whole group, say, hey, just wanted to chat, and like Noah said, like offer that interaction. And like with anything else, come in with as little expectation as you can. Offer that you would like to talk with that person, and offer to talk with them later. But that isn't a requirement, that you won't be like crestfallen if that doesn't happen. And the other part in terms of like approaching a group, I say the more that you are in groups, the easier it will be for you to integrate mentally that like it's okay to approach a group. This is something that I've personally experienced, is like the more times I'm in a social circle and then I experience someone else approaching, the more I know in my heart that it is okay for me to do that, because I see it go well over and over again. That is sheer kind of an experience quantity type of problem. You can overcome that though, and over time I hope for you that it will get easier as it has for me.
And I think also, we've been talking a lot about the conversation has largely revolved around talking to people that you generally would consider like above your class, above your skill level.
Or at your skill level, roughly.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say is for people that are at your skill level, I think that for like things can be a little bit different, but also like I think the mindset is a little bit different. And I'm curious about your thoughts about like, what is the balance between, like obviously you can reach out to pros for mentorship or advice, or just to have conversations and get a better perspective of what their world looks like. But what about the people that are in your peer network, or that are your peers, whether it's fellow students, whether it's people who are also on the outskirts of groups at conventions that also seem a little adrift, people sitting alone at the cafeteria next to the convention hall. Like how do you kind of like, what's the balance there?
Yeah, I mean, personally, like I find it easier to approach those people for obvious reasons. I've had the experience of socializing with the other person who's kind of waiting to enter that group. And often there's like, I find it easiest to kind of broach that person with the joke of like, oh, haha, like we're both waiting for this circle, or like, are you waiting to talk with this person too? Like, aren't they so cool? Like using that status of being outside the group for a moment as kind of your shared connection point. Like that might be truly the thing that is connecting you in that moment, is you're both kind of, trying to make it into the social scene, or interested in this other person or this other game that maybe this person's a developer on. Who knows? Finding that seed is always a good tact that I personally try to find. But generally speaking, when you're talking about socializing with your peer group, personally, and maybe this is just like my social style, I try to find just like I was talking about with that social media manager earlier, find the thing that I revere in that person. Find the thing that I respect them for, that I think they are cool for. You know, it might be if you're both students at university, it might be that student, that like class project that you saw, and you know that they programmed that specific interaction and you thought it looked kind of cool. Compliment them on that. Bring that up as your shared thing. Like, oh, I think that what you did is cool. We now share that interest. Or, oh, we shared this class and that class was really boring. Haha, that class was really boring, is your shared seed. Something that you can kind of broach that person about. Part of it comes down to knowing kind of why you're socializing with that person in the first place, and that is that shared seed. Generally, it comes back to, like, it's easier to remember with peers that these people are just people, and that everyone likes to socialize in that sense. There's a little bit less intimidation factor for the idolized, or like the idol factor that I talked about a little bit earlier.
I suppose like kind of the root of my question was like, you know, I think we danced around it a little bit.
Sure.
Like, what is the value of connecting with your peers versus connecting with pros, right? Like, why would, because again, we've revolved around like, seeking out people that could help you further your career or help you, help mentor you or whatever. But obviously those relationships are a lot harder to have kind of a give and take. But again, you know, what value does connecting with people that you maybe consider at or even possibly below, although it's kind of like, it's a weird, you know, mentality, but people at, like, peers, right, at your level in your community, or when you're at conventions, for example, you know, people that are not necessarily the big pros, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, dare I say, I think peer relationships in that sense are possibly more valuable in the long game than talking with like someone, you know, 3 times your experience or 3 times your years in the industry even, because those are the people that you can foster a more long-term relationship with. There is, like you said, there's more opportunity for give and take because you're on a more similar experience level. Great examples of this are like other people that we know from university at AeLa. You know, sometimes I will see a funding opportunity, like a grant or a competition, like a pitching competition, that I will say, oh, this isn't right for us, but I know a bunch of people kind of around our experience level who maybe could benefit from this, and I can send it to them. And I sometimes receive something like that. Oh, hey, I thought of you when I saw this. Or, you know, we share, because I know that this other person is also still learning roughly about the same level as I am. When I see a cool Twitter thread about you know, business growth, or about marketing values on TikTok or something, like, I think, oh, I could share this with those people, and you start to lift each other up in that sense. It's also someone that you can talk to when you know, I'm not going to go to my Class A mentors and say, like, on a day-to-day basis, I'm really struggling with imposter syndrome. Those are the people that you go to your peers and you're like, hey, this is like been really hard, or we're really struggling to break through with these publishers. Has anyone had experience with these people before? Or I'm really struggling on this class project or with this specific professor. Like, anyone have any tips on kind of how to get through that? Or maybe we're just all going through it together and can commiserate a little bit. Knowing people at your skill level that can continue to grow with you and you can support each other as you grow is a great give and take, and is also really valuable when you're talking about, like, play testing, for example. When you have a game that you're working on, maybe for a class project, maybe outside of class, having people 4 times your experience level give you feedback is great. But learning alongside your peers as they give you feedback, and you talk about that feedback and you hash through your problems at the same kind of pace as each other, and you can do that to each other, that's another give and take that's tremendously valuable. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. You can also learn a lot from playtesting for other people too.
You can.
And again, that's that, you know, we've learned so much from our friends going through their own unique experiences trying to start businesses, and trying to be supportive of them. But there's a real human value to be gained from watching other people succeed too, and succeeding together, and we all kind of everyone's successes are shared, right? Like we've seen some of our peers do some really incredible things and felt really proud of them, and because we were able to be there for that journey and support them, and they've supported us. And so I think that there's also a value there in terms of just kind of spirit.
Selfishly, our peer network, like people roughly our experience level, have some of the most long-lasting network relationships for our company, and are also the people who are most adamant to cheer us on when we succeed, which just feels really good, That's
also how you end up in that group and not on the outside.
That is how you end up in a group conversation at something like a convention, or even at just like a rock game dev meetup or something like that. Gotcha. I tend, I guess, to miss my timing, which leads to just listening and not talking about what's in my head. Glad to know that I'm not the only one having a difficult time on this. Thanks for the advice. I'll try to use some of them in my upcoming network opportunities. I will add to that. I personally really struggle, and this is very, very personal, but I struggle with always wanting to say the thing that's in my head, and constantly feeling okay, if I have an interesting thought, something I think is interesting at least, I need to put it out there. Other people need to hear this cool shit that's in my head. And sometimes I find, especially in big group conversations, I have to really exercise my muscle that says I'm allowed to have a cool thought, and not everyone needs to hear it right now. Maybe that is then something that you can, maybe say you're in a group conversation, but you're just listening and you have cool thoughts, but the group dissipates before you have an opportunity to say your thing. Maybe person A over there is someone you want to talk to later. Those thoughts that you have, you can go up to that person and be like, oh, I was in that group as we were talking about this. Didn't have a whole lot of chance to say anything, but I thought it was really cool that we were talking about it, and I had this other unique thought. That is your shared seed now. Great. And it gives you something to start the next conversation with. I've used that once or twice. And also just, for me personally, practicing the skill of valuing listening over speaking, especially in large group dynamics, has been something that I continue to work on. Not to say that you need to, just that I am. Any other questions, thoughts on networking? That actually went a lot longer than I thought it would. If not, I think we will open it up to, if this mouse is working. There we go. We'll move, if anyone has any latent networking questions or thoughts, we can share those. But I will open up the floor to a more general production Q&A, a little bit more in my expertise. Talk about any general production questions you have about games production, or it could be specific to a project that you're working on, or a team that you're working with, or anything related to kind of producing games. I do have a couple questions that people sent ahead of time, or thoughts that people sent ahead of time. But I want to prioritize people who are kind of here in chat right now. If you have any thoughts, any questions, I'd love to kind of address them. I guess I can start with one of the canned questions that I have, or not canned.
Yeah, we'll give it a second for things to roll in.
Yeah, one of the questions that I got ahead of time from someone is, or a question that I got in a couple different forms from other people, is how to kind of maintain organization over the long term. Part of a producer's job, obviously, being to kind of create systems that organize a team, and then maintaining them over time is the implicit back half of that statement. Maintaining that over time can be very difficult in my experience as a producer, and as being on teams in general. And I have a few thoughts, a few tips on that. The first being developing a system to revisit those organizational systems. So for me, over time, this has looked like different things. Right now, I use a tool called Todoist in my personal life. Essentially, it's a to-do list, but it allows me to set dates. So every day, different things pop up based on the timing that I give them. For example, one of the things that I do for Aesthetician Labs to keep us organized is once per quarter, I have what I call the quarterly process. And all it does is it collects all of our receipts from the quarter, collects all of our bank statements, and handles all of our QuickBooks type things, so that at the end of the year, when tax season rolls around, I am not running around with my hair on fire for a month and a half trying to do all of this labor. It is a system that happens once per quarter. But that is a system of organization that if I don't remind myself to do every quarter, easily falls by the wayside. Super easy for me to forget that it's happening and for that to kind of atrophy. And so I, in Todoist, set a reminder, the first week of every quarter, remind me that I need to do this. This could be Google reminders, this could be Apple reminders, this could be any sort of system that reminds you of things at a period that you set. Using tools, externalizing that reminder is part of my system that keeps me organized, that helps keep the team organized. Another thing that I would say with this is prioritize making organizational systems that are as low maintenance as possible. Set the bar as low as you reasonably can. If you overdo the organizational system and when you create it, it becomes harder and harder to maintain it over time. Great example of this is I run meetings every week for our company, and when I started making the template that these meetings run off of, it was just too much. I was visiting topics every week that didn't need to be visited every week. And what that was doing was artificially bloating the process of making those meeting notes and then running through meetings. And it was just taking too much time and too much energy every time. So starting to recognize, I don't need to talk about this every week. I can talk about this once a month. Setting a reminder to make sure I talked about it once a month, and then that's it. Lower the bar as much as you reasonably can. And that sounds bad, but on indie teams, we are working with a very finite amount of resources, amount of time, amount of energy. Using it as wisely as you can is one of the most valuable things I have been able to do in my job, is learn where that value is best spent. The other part, the third kind of part, revisiting the first part about externalizing your reminders, is remind yourself periodically to look at your organizational systems and assess whether or not they're working. This was something I neglected for years when I first started, is once a year at minimum, usually I aim for twice a year, I literally look at all of our meeting notes templates. I look at any templates we have, I look at any systems I've developed to keep us organized, and I say, are they still working? Is there places that I can kind of trim the fat? Is there things that it's not doing its job? Do I need to add something to make this work better? The better they work, the more likely you are to keep up with them. The more reminded you are that they need to happen, the more likely you are to follow through with that. There's so much there, and this answer is so specific to teams. But at a general level, those are some of my core philosophies about staying organized over time. And I guess I'll add to that. Your needs, your organizational needs as a company will likely change over time as the people on your team change, as the size of your teams change, as the type of projects you're working on change. How you stay organized will need to adapt over time. It certainly has for AeLa. Don't be afraid of that. It's okay if things need to change. Just making room to change those preemptively as best as you can is vitally important. Got another question here. This question is specifically about how to kind of prevent back-to-back burnout or long-term energy sapping type of work. Another question that I think depends a little bit on kind of the team circumstances. Unfortunately, I will say that in my experience, I think part of this just comes down to funding. If you have financial stability, the ability to kind of breathe deep and take a minute to recuperate between sprints or between milestones or between projects even is easier to find. That said, I think there is something to be said for the fact that when AeLa was early on, we were working on Crazy Blades, for example, we had less production power. I just didn't know what I was doing at the time. And so I was less thoughtful about how work was being scheduled over the long term, to say, okay, we know that we need to do a lot of work in the next 3 weeks, but intentionally trying to carve out room for the following 3 weeks after that to be a little bit lower capacity, to be a little bit easier on the team. Thinking that far ahead was not something that I was particularly adept at yet. Thinking ahead is one of the biggest things. Like, and I have to make a lot of time for that, a lot of room to think, okay, like we are on track to burnout. How do I prevent that? How do I increase the kind of time and energy that the team has available? Easier said than done. And sometimes that means evaluating the scope of your project because you need to be doing less. Unfortunately, that is part of it. Or we're finishing this project and it's a hard requirement that we need to take at least a couple days off before we think about the next thing. It depends a lot on the team, and I encourage, if teams are struggling with this, leverage your network. Try to find someone in your network for whom production comes a little bit more naturally. If you don't have a dedicated producer on staff, and just ask for a little bit of help. This is the type of thing that I'm happy to talk with teams about, is hop on an hour-long call and troubleshoot. Like, hey, it's been really hard for the team to find ways to rest. Like, walk me through your project and like let me see if there's any ways that I can help you strategize on how to make room for this. Setting reasonable deadlines for yourself, also a key part of this, but this comes down to funding. When you have funding, it's very easy to say like, oh, just set your timelines more realistically or set them less ambitiously. But if you're vying for funding, or you need that funding at a certain period, we've been there, and I understand that that's a lot easier said than done. An AeLa philosophy is to kind of set the bar reasonably low. Like, tell people it will take, the period of time we estimate plus 30%, plus 50%, because we know that we will need that time actually. That estimates are generally wrong. If you find that you're consistently planning for an amount of work, giving yourself a buffer, and then eating that whole buffer and still feeling like you're crunching, increase your buffer. Like, your estimates clearly need a bit more time. This is very multifaceted.
I think a quiet part of this answer also is just pay attention to, if you set deadlines, you set timelines, pay attention to how you slip those, and how your estimates slip, and get an understanding of reality of what your team can do versus what your team believes that they can do. And that, I think, helps avoid those kind of crunchy sprints back to back, because you're not planning for a fully packed sprint every time.
Yep. Some people will, for some teams, or even for our team previously, one of the ways that you can slip a sprint, or one of the ways that you can run long on a sprint, is that literally the time you estimate it takes to implement this feature or complete this task is just, you estimate too little consistently over time. That one's pretty easy to diagnose. Something that was recently something that kind of plagued me as a producer for our team, that was harder to diagnose, was our estimates were generally on for tasks and for features and whatnot. But what wasn't on was when I estimated a sprint, a 2-week block. I would slot in all of those tasks, and they would add up to the number of hours that my team was working in a week. But what I was missing was that I wasn't factoring in the time that someone isn't working directly on a project, but they are working. Time that it takes to log in for the day, time that it takes to transition between tasks, that context switching, time that it takes to communicate with each other and keep yourself organized. Those are all kind of unspoken things that take time, that we can forget take time. And therefore, we give ourselves too much work in too short of a period of time, because we aren't accommodating for the silent things that take time all the time, no matter what. Or, for example, we were in contract negotiations recently. Contract negotiations take meetings externally and internally, and takes looking over the contract and reading and providing edits and revisiting over and over again. And that was a huge time sink that I did not anticipate. Looking for as many things that you don't expect as possible, organizationally, personally, and accommodating for those before they happen. Easier said than done, but with practice does get easier. like Noah said, though, that's a great point, is like pay attention to the ways that you are missing your deadlines, because that will inform what solutions you need to fix it.
As a follow-up, how do you plan for things that you don't know about yet? How do you plan for things that you haven't yet experienced? Because like you said, there's so many things that can come up.
Oh, yeah. Depends a little bit on... So, like, for example, say you are trying to release a game on a platform that you've never worked on before. There's going to be a lot of unknowns, and you know that, but you don't know what they are, and you don't know how long they're going to take. One of the ways that I try to go about this with my team is do as much online research as you can. Look around, poke around on the internet. Hey, anyone have any like detailed walkthroughs on Reddit about how long it takes to release on Xbox or something? See if people are talking about it online. Great first step. Second step, look at your network. See who else has launched on that platform. Try to schedule a meeting with them. Ask to poke their brain a little bit and ask them about their experience. How long did it take you to talk with this publisher? How long did it take you to launch on that platform? What were the gotchas that you experienced so that I can plan for those? Leveraging kind of the hive mind of your network, really useful thing to kind of expose the unknowns. That could be for something like launching on a platform like Switch that you've never developed for. That could also be, though, for, we're about to like officially sign that our business is an LLC. I don't know what that looks like. Talk with other people, and then also like talk with an expert, a true expert. In the case of forming a business, that would be a lawyer. Sometimes if you're like in school, you can get a lawyer to help you pro bono, for example, if you don't have funding. All sorts of resources out there, asynchronous, as in like Reddit, Twitter, whatever, and synchronous, as in going and talking with people. But if you don't know it, all it takes is asking someone who might, and then doing that a couple times, and you'll start to get an idea.
I suppose we're getting a little bit off track of what my original question was, which was you don't know it, right? It's you're talking about preempting things that you already know are coming up, right?
Sure.
I'm saying, how do you plan for things that inevitably come up that you could not plan for? This always happens. You mentioned it slightly, like these things do happen. How do you plan for the big technical hurdles that come up out of nowhere, or the delays from contract negotiations that got drug on longer than you expected, sick days, those types of things? Like how do you plan for the unexpected unknowns?
Depends on kind of who you talk to, but there is a rule of thumb that adding margins is like non-negotiable. Adding 15 to 30%, depending on the context. Money or time or energy that you set aside and you say, I don't know what this is going to be for. I just trust that I'm going to need it. And you will. People will be sick. This feature will take 3 times as long as you expected for problems that are out of your control. Have money or time that you have set aside and you said, it's going to be there. We need it to be there. I can't tell you why yet. On our current project, Coco's Atlas at AeLa, what this looks like is every milestone, I have a certain number of sprints, depends on the time, but the last sprint is always entirely, if not mostly, dedicated to bug fixing and like catching things that fell through the cracks in the rest of the milestone. Because inevitably, while we do our best to do quality work when we're implementing features and implementing content, problems will arise. And so I bookmark that last sprint of every milestone to say, things are going to come up that I can't anticipate. Here is the time where we will handle them. And just knowing that we need that. Like as you are up and coming as a developer, as a producer, just as a team member, the biggest thing I can instill is that you will guaranteed run into things that you don't expect, that take longer, that cost more money than you expect. Do your best to provide margins for that. And then over time, as you get more experienced, as you continue to learn, like we were talking about before, just pay attention. Do your best to listen when something unexpectedly happens. Make a note of that. Write it down in a notebook or something. And every so often, look through that notebook and say, what are the things that are catching us off guard? Are there any patterns to that? Maybe we're always missing that, every year tax season rolls around and we're never prepared for it. That's a trend you can follow over time and then start to learn from and anticipate. The practice of anticipating problems is a skill like any other. If you pay attention and you work at it, you can get better at finding where those holes are going to be. But the last thing I'll say on this is it's easy to be too hard on yourself. If you are the person, whether you have the producer role on your title or not, it can be very easy to be too hard on yourself for not expecting something. And I would just say it is much like imposter syndrome, much like anxiety about networking. It is normal. You do your best to learn from it, but try not to beat yourself up and move on having learned from it. How are we doing on time?
Fine so far. We're about an hour in.
I want to give one more call for questions from the chat. I don't think there have been any on production stuff yet. I've got one more that I kind of solicited ahead of time that I'll answer. But if anyone in chat has questions, I'll say now is probably coming up on your last chance for it. Oh, I see a question. I'm practicing my skills as a producer this summer for a small game with a team of 6. And some of the major challenges I faced started when we changed our workflow from in-person to remote meetings / work time for necessary reasons. Definitely. For me, communication seems to be a bit less active and deadlines from different tasks getting delayed. I was wondering if you also faced new challenges when working on a game remotely as a producer. Any advice to make the most from this type of working environment? Very tough. When you have major shifts in your team like that, it's definitely very tough for everyone to adapt. AeLa specifically has been mostly remote, I would say, over time. We have never been 100%, I shouldn't say never. We've only been 100% in person for very limited periods of time. That didn't become the norm for us. So I don't remember some of these challenges as well as someone who more recently did this might. But what tips I can offer depends a little bit on who's on your team. If this is a student team where people are working part-time jobs or maybe aren't available on the same schedule during a semester or what have you, this might be harder, but one of the best things that I have found to be beneficial is a routine meeting that everyone comes to at least once a week. We do twice. Some teams do daily stand-ups, and daily stand-ups, I understand, are super helpful for this. Not my personal tool of choice, but I would hand it to you as possibly something that'd be very helpful for you. They don't have to be long. They could be 5 to 10 minutes. Getting everyone in the same room at the same time to synchronize and say, what am I doing? What problems am I running into? Helps keep everyone on the same page a little bit, especially if you're dealing with deadlines slipping and getting delayed and people being less active. Daily stand-ups, if you haven't already explored them, might be a really wonderful way to try and bridge that gap between communication and also keep people more on the same page about why deadlines are getting delayed and how we can fix that. Some of this, though, is, again, like we were talking about earlier in terms of timelines, it might be that when everyone is at home, there's maybe more distractions or there's more problems, and therefore you need to build in a bigger buffer for your team in order to prevent your deadlines from being delayed. It's inevitable that, changes in our environment are going to affect us mentally and physically. And if that is an accommodation that your team needs, there's no shame in that, and just planning for it is the best you can do. I'd also say doing what you can to encourage systems of clear communication. So instead of daily stand-ups, Aesthetician Labs does 2 meetings a week for a 4-day week. So that's every other day we have a meeting where we effectively had to have a stand-up. But we also, in our Discord, we have a channel called Check-ins, and we have built a team culture, that every morning when you come into work, you leave a little checklist in that channel saying, what are the things I'm planning to do today? What are the things on my plate? And then when you do all your work, and at the end of the day, you mark that checklist. Maybe you got a white checkbox because you did this task, but you have a red X because you didn't get to that task. And you put that same checklist, marked up with what you did and didn't do, back into check-ins at the end of the day. And it is effectively our version of a stand-up. It is our way of clearly communicating to each other how fast progress is moving on a project. I'm not saying you need to do check-ins and check-outs the way that we do, especially if you do daily stand-up calls. But that is a system that we have set up to help facilitate communication and clarity of communication and transparency in our communication. That might look differently for you. Maybe it's every day everyone needs to share one screenshot or photo of what they're working on, just as a way to lubricate and get everyone on the same page consistently. Brainstorming what specifically might work for your team is another great reason to reach out to someone specifically in your network, but there's lots of ways you can get creative about this. Developing systems, though, one way or another, whether it's a meeting or a Discord chat or a Slack chat or whatever, that routinely get people on the same page, will help you lubricate communication and also hopefully start to track down the reasons why your deadlines are slipping so that you can address those separately.
I will say, on top of our check-ins and check-outs, we also have twice a week we have meetings. So we have our Monday and our Wednesday meeting. And so there's, again, an opportunity to sync, even if it's not every day. We are doing check-ins. How's your work going? What's your update on this project? That kind of thing. I think that helps as well.
There's this corporate adage that like meetings are hell and I hate meetings. And I thoroughly disagree with that. And granted, I'm a producer, like I'm biased. I like meetings because I run them and I think I run them pretty well. But meetings are not the enemy. Bad meetings are the enemy. Good meetings facilitate clear communication and get people on the same page and help you find issues as soon as possible and make sure that you have an opportunity to talk as a team about what's coming down the road. All things that are necessary in a team that works well together and communicates clearly.
From the receiving end, something Sam does really well is actually puts together slide decks for every meeting. So when we have a meeting, we go through the slides together and all of the information for the meeting is there. We're all on the same page. It's right in front of us. We're all there. All the links are prepared. But also there's a template, right?
Yes.
There's a format for our meetings. There's a specific format for Monday and there's a specific format for Wednesday. And we know what to expect going in and we're all prepared to hit those beats and then get out of there. And, normally the meetings are 30 minutes on Monday and to an hour because we put beefier stuff on there. But then 15 minutes on Wednesday. And so it's a real easy check-in, check-out, and then, back to work. I
try to create meetings that could run themselves if I weren't there. That if I had to call in sick on Monday, Noah and Aiden could still get into the Discord channel, without me, open up the meeting notes, and flip through them together. And because they've seen me run this meeting so many times, they know the questions I'm going to ask. They know the way I'm going to run through these bullet points. They can ask each other those questions, get on the same page with each other, and get out, and I will barely be missed. Building that system that my teammates know what to expect, that takes time, obviously. It is purely because I've run through that meeting in that template hundreds of times with this team. It's evolved over time, obviously, and it's not the same every single Monday, but they know what to expect because I've built up timing over and over and over again. But you can build that for your team is really what I want to get at. Figure out what you need. Figure out the most concise way to put it together. Create a template out of that and use it regularly. Revisit the template periodically. Remind yourself to use the template if you need to. And start to build that system up. And I will say that those work in person and online. I run all of those meetings. We are entirely remote. You can run effective meetings. You can run effective stand-up meetings over Discord, over Slack, over Zoom, whatever tool you prefer to use. Find the best time for everyone on your team. Doesn't need to be first thing in the morning. I personally prefer it. find a time that works for everyone, get everyone together, have a consistent format, get everyone talking, get everyone in the same room, whether or not that's face-to-face. I want to give you an opportunity to ask any follow-ups if you have them. But in the meantime, I don't want to embark on another question in case you have any thoughts. For anyone who is kind of lingering, I will use this as a kind of last opportunity to plug myself. I'll leave my info back up on the page in case you want it. If you ever have specific questions about production on your team, about networking also, please feel free to shoot me a DM on Discord or in Rock Game Dev's Discord. I'm happy to talk with you about your issues, hear what thoughts you have, hear about your experience. So thank you for the tips. You're more than welcome. Happy you were in chat to ask some really good questions. Thank you for asking. Thanks for being here.
All right, I think last question then, or do you want to just wrap it up there?
I was thinking that was going to be the last question.
Okay, perfect.
I do have one last question that I actually want to ask. I want to give the answer. So I'm going to ask myself the question. What are some very good resources for someone who's trying to begin learning about production? I'm going to plug a book that I just read because I freaking love it. It's called A Playful Production Process by Richard Lemmercand. I actually don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name. A Playful Production Process has been probably one of the most career-changing books or pieces of professional development that I've engaged with ever. Sorry, our cat was in the background making some noise. It's a really wonderful book if you are kind of looking to troubleshoot your production process on the whole. Really wonderful textbook that hopefully will answer all of the questions that we've talked about and abundance more. Our cat's getting into some real trouble in the back of the room, so I apologize if I sound distracted. You can also find lots of really good articles and whatnot online. Rami Ismail's Leveling the Playing Field is a blog that I refer to often for all sorts of games-related topics, not just production, although there are some production things. There's also design and marketing topics. His articles are very, very good. GDC Vault has some really wonderful talks about production, about networking, all sorts of juicy topics there. And I think it's a game developer now, no longer Gamasutra. Yes, it's gamedeveloper.com. Also has some really wonderful articles that I've referred to a number of times to help me in troubleshooting some of our production things. Reach out to producers that you know. People and will always be able to provide a more nuanced pool of expertise to you than a book or an article or a video will ever be able to offer, because it's a real person. So start using those networking tips that we talked about earlier, and go talk with your producers. We're very sweet. I promise we don't bite. Thank you everyone again for dropping by for this little mini talk and Q&A night. I had a blast just kind of blabbering in my mouth.
Yep. Thank you for providing this information, Sam. Unfortunately, we're going to have to be quick to wrap it up before our cat, she's in a cone right now, and she is a little clumsy. And so before she breaks something,
which she's very close to doing.
We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you again, Sam, for that great talk. And thank you to everybody here for joining. Again, if you want to follow Rock Game Dev, you can check out our website at rockgamedev.com. You can find our social media, join our Discord. All of the great stuff is there. And this video will be up for your review on our YouTube channel. We usually put it up by Friday, but it should be up tomorrow. So yeah, it'll be up soon though. And of course, you can get a notification of that by subscribing to the channel or by joining our Discord, where we really do most of the communication there. That's the kind of central hub of our community. So And again, if you have an idea for a talk, anything you'd like to see or anything you'd like to give, please give me a message. My information was at the top of the talk, but you can find me in the announcements channel on our Discord. Yeah. Thank you again, Sam, for this great talk.
Please don't hesitate to reach out. I genuinely would love to talk with any of you. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks so much, everyone.